Welcome to episode 6 of the Give Us Time podcast, the podcast that highlights the extraordinary members of our armed forces and their families. This episode, we have an amazing guest. She set up and ran Band of Sisters and Band of Brothers from scratch, creating a service that offers support and a listening ear for loved ones of our military heroes. For those regular on the podcast, you may have heard her name before, as she is the wife of our Ambassador David Richmond. And now you're going to hear the force behind the Colonel. We are pleased to welcome Alison Richmond. So, Alison, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem. Nice to speak to you.
The force behind the Colonel. Where did you dig that from?
I'm incredibly professional.
It's true. It's true. Is it Ali? Is that right?
Uh-huh. Behind every successful man.
Oh, yeah. I know.
And as you can hear, joining us as always is Scotty Derrick and Rupert Forrest.
Hello.
So our first question we want to go and ask is, Ali, do you mind just telling our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Going back how far?
Let's start off to, I think when you first met David then, around that sort of time.
Okay, so
Probably can't remember.
I can actually. I met him at a wedding, bit of a, that's fairly normal. Met him at a wedding and I was going through my don't trust any man stage, which women go through fairly frequently when they're younger. He was quite persistent. So I decided to go along with it. Actually, it was great. He was about to go away for 6 months. So I saw him, maybe a handful of times, if that. And then it was back in the days, early 90s, where the only form of communication was through blueies, which is where you write to each other. Of course, he went away and we were just mates. And we wrote to each other for 6 months. And actually, it was, because of course you don't get that now. You can text and you can speak whenever you want to. We got to know each other because, of course, you had to fill a bluey every time you wrote something. Which was really nice. I didn't see him in the middle. We were trying to see if we could do a holiday. It wasn't going to work. And when he came home after 6 months, I have to say I was a bit scared. I didn't even have a photograph. I couldn't remember what he looked like. I didn't know what it was going to be like when I saw him. But actually it was, clearly it was all okay. He came back in September and we got engaged December. So it was quite quick. But actually, I think that old-fashioned way of getting to know somebody was quite nice.
Amazing! So you guys, it hadn't even been a year.
No, a matter of weeks.
Oh, yeah. That's incredible! Yeah, that's incredible. Crazy.
And blueies were really good.
Yeah,
to write your blueies. But so was David able to write his bluey in crayons wherever he was, and draw little pictures and stuff, and then send it back?
Yeah, you'd get nothing, and then all of a sudden you'd get 6 or 7 coming through, because it all depended, didn't it, when they got picked up, where they were in the jungle to when they could actually send them. So, which was quite nice. And then we got married in 92. So by the time David left the army, I think did that make us a military wife for 20 years.
Wow.
And we're now in our final house, which is so we moved 15 times, which was quite a lot of upheaval, but it sounds worse than it did. Actually, it didn't ever feel that bad. We had a few short postings that kind of added to the average, but most of them were about 2 years in one place.
Okay. So obviously from our last previous guest, we've heard it from obviously their side of it, from them being deployed. Do you mind telling us what it's like from your side of it? You've obviously gone into a little bit of detail there, but you just want expanding, what it's like being a military spouse.
Yeah, and it really does depend on the deployment. Funnily enough, David's final deployment to Afghanistan was very different. He'd been to Iraq a couple of times before, and the first time was scary. In fact, the first time to Iraq was very scary because that was at the time we got engaged, literally the day he got called up. They were told at Christmas time that it was highly unlikely they were going. We decided to tell everyone we were going to get engaged. And David didn't turn up to come and see my parents. And it turned out that the CO had called them all in. But of course, all we were hearing on the news was biological and chemical warfare. So when he went out, it was really scary. And actually the worst was waking up one morning in the days of radio alarms and hearing that that was it, we were at war with Iraq, and just having this awful gut feeling because you just didn't know what was going to happen. So that was my first experience as a girlfriend, really. And then afterwards, I think by the time they're deployed, you kind of want them to go, because I think what people don't realise, they don't just get up and leave one day. 18 months before they go away, they're preparing to go away. So they're constantly away on exercise. So you don't see a huge amount of them anyway. And then about a couple of weeks before they go, their kind of mindset has already moved. They're out there. They're in that zone of needing to go. And actually, it's quite tricky because you get to the stage where you just think, just go. Just leave now. It's quite stressful all round for all of us. And then when they go, I'd say the first couple of weeks is just getting into that routine. And then particularly if you had children, you get into a real routine with them where you become mum and dad, everything. And then of course when they come back, it's wonderful again to see them, but they kind of get a bit in the way. I don't mean that in an awful way, but you've got this lovely routine going. You've got your sort of maybe your new disciplines in place with your children, and they come back and sort of ruin it all. They leave their boots all over the place. They're a mess. The children, all the things you've taught them they can't do, all of a sudden they can do because daddy's home. So it's quite tricky, actually. But yeah, again, it does depend where they're going. I mean, the last time David went away was Afghanistan. And obviously, as you know, he didn't come back in the way that we were hoping to. And I think there was almost a bit of a sixth sense. I sort of had a really funny feeling about it. And funnily enough, so did my eldest daughter. They were 10 and 12 when he first went. They had their birthdays whilst he was out there. And my eldest daughter said to me, I knew something was going to happen. I had this horrible feeling, which was really quite strange. And actually, when we told her, she sort of nodded along as if to say, yeah, I guessed something like that was going to happen, which was really odd, really weird feeling.
Oh, wow.
But, yeah, and when it's funny because when I got the phone call, I was preparing to go away for the weekend with a friend, with her 2 children and my 2 children. So, and I was working from home at the time, so I was busy trying to sort of finish off all the bits with the work. I was busy trying to make a great big chili to take with us to eat that evening, and I remember then having to, I got a phone call whilst I was stirring the chili. And so when David used to phone when we were in Canterbury, we had a phone at the top of the house where he normally phoned us on, because you were only allowed something like half an hour a week. It wasn't very long to have a call. And we'd found that our personal calls ended up being about other sort of welfare issues that had been going on. So we never really had that time for ourselves. So they set up a satellite phone for us in the house so that anything welfare-y or anything he felt I needed to know, he'd ring me on the upstairs phone. Well, my normal landline downstairs phone rung, and I got a sort of a mumbled voice. And I'm like, hello, couldn't hear what it was, mumbled voice and some heavy breathing. And then it went dead. And I'm thinking, oh, God, I really could do without this. Put the phone down, thinking it was, I've said, like a dodgy, dirty phone call or something like that.
Sorry about
that. But the weird thing was, inside, I never thought it was David then. But I thought, for some reason, somebody in Afghanistan had got my number. I don't know why. I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but I had a bit of a kind of weird feeling about it. And then as I was about to go off, I thought, I haven't told Jamie, who was our families officer, where I'm going. And it was drilled into us that if ever we went away, whatever we were doing, we had to let him know. Because, of course, if anything happened to your other half, they needed to be able to get hold of you quickly. I thought, right, I must just run in there and go and tell him. And I ran into the office. I remember seeing him. He looked at me and he was completely grey. Of course, what I didn't know then was that he'd received the news, but had been told that David wanted to self-inform, if possible, so he wasn't to say anything. And I thought he was looking a bit grey because his wife was living up in Scotland, and I know he missed her. And I remember saying, "Oh, Jamie, are you okay? You don't look too good." And he said, "Oh, no, I'm fine. I see you missing Ange." And he went, yeah. I said, "I've just come to tell you I'm going away for the weekend." Of course, he looked, he went, "Right, okay, where are you going?" So I gave him all the instructions. And of course, inside, he must have thought, "You're not going anywhere." And I went off. And then I got another phone call. And this time, it was just really weird again. It was this voice that I didn't recognise. Again, there was a bit of breathing. But it turns out what had happened is he had been handed a satellite phone before he was about to have the surgery. And because he was obviously drugged up, he didn't know how to use it. And nobody thought to step in and show him, so he couldn't work it. So that's how I got the heavy breathing, and then it went dead. Whereas this time, a nurse actually put it on for him and held the button and showed him how to work it. And I remember him saying, I was like, "Who is it?" He said, "It's your husband." I thought, well, that's not something he would say. That's weird. And I started to almost feel a bit angry because I thought it was this dirty phone call again. And I thought, how dare you? How dare somebody phone up and pretend to be my husband? And then I was like, where are you? And he said, "Well, I'm in Camp Bastion." I said, "Okay." At the time, David posted he was in a place called Misakala in Helmand. And I thought, well, that's odd because I had notification. He always says I can't phone for a few days. And if you can't phone for a few days, you know that they're off out doing whatever, wherever. And he'd said that a couple of days before. So I thought, why is he now in Camp Bastion? And that's when he said, I'm in hospital. And then he explained sort of what had happened, which I have to say was, obviously a massive shock. Because the thing is, he was still quite drugged up. I didn't really think about asking him the right questions because you don't know how, he'd said he'd been shot and he was seriously ill and they would get him home as soon as they could. But I hadn't really worked. I didn't know any more than that. And I remember at the end, he said, "Are you okay? We'll get somebody to come round." And I put the phone down and thought, I don't understand. So how bad is this? And then obviously everything kicked in place and somebody had popped around and they didn't know either. You get listings like your VSI and you think, well, what do I do? What happens now? What do I do now? What happens? How do I tell the kids? How, and everything sort of is a bit strange. And then I thought, well, I need to tell David's parents. It's really important because I knew that I'd get the call, being, as they call you, the dependent, but also, the parents are really important as well. And thankfully, I get on well with them. So because I know that has been an issue for some people with notification. And they just arrived in Scotland, actually, and his mother, she actually had to phone me back because she was so stunned she didn't know what to say. It's just not what you expect, is it, really? It's not a call that anybody ever expects. But yeah, I think the next bit was almost worse because nobody knew anything. I didn't really know when he was coming back. I didn't know how bad it was going to be. I didn't know you just don't know anything, which is quite hard.
And at that stage, Ali, was it, when you say you didn't really know, how long was it before you actually got an actual brief of what was wrong, how he got injured, how he got shot? Did you get any information like that? Or he was in theatre, this is what happened, he's on a flight coming back? Did you get much information at all? Or
no, I remember I got a call the next day from the Amy, an AO, I think she was. Anyway, she was out there, and she phoned me and said, I just need to let you know, I've been to see him. This is what's happened. They're getting him on a flight straight away. He'll be coming back, and blah, blah, blah. It was funny enough. She says to me afterwards, I remember meeting her a few months after David was back, and she said, I remember so clearly lying through my teeth and saying, I'm with him, he looks absolutely fine. She said he was shocking, he looked awful, but she said, I wasn't going to tell you that. But yeah, so she gave me that information, and Jamie, the families officer, he didn't really know very much. He'd been given a bit of a brief, but yeah, you don't really know until they're back, to be honest with you. But the fact I'd spoken to him made a massive difference, because I knew it was okay. So some people are put into induced comas and they don't see them, and it's just awful. That didn't happen. He was awake and he could talk, and actually that made a massive difference. So yeah,
I was going to go and say, obviously this was a very high profile thing, and a high profile event at the time. It made national newspapers, with given David's rank and everything. Was that sort of surreal, seeing him perhaps on the news and just being like, this is an out of body experience? What's happening?
Yeah, do you know though, I felt really uncomfortable with it, because on the same day, 2 young lads from 2 Para were killed. And why are they talking? My husband was injured. Yeah, that's awful, but 2 young lads were killed. And that got a mention, because they always mentioned when something like that happened. But I just felt it was really inappropriate when some people are paying the ultimate sacrifice there. So yeah, I felt quite uncomfortable with it, if I'm honest. But luckily, I think Adam, who had been the sort of spokesman at the time, had mentioned that and said, that please, let's remember the 2 young lads that paid the ultimate sacrifice, which was good.
You don't have to go and tell us what it was like if you don't want to, but you briefly spoke. How was it, telling your 2 kids at the time? Because what were their ages?
Well, they just turned 11 and 13.
So they're aware then. They're aware of what's going on around them.
Absolutely aware, and listening to the news, reading papers. So they knew exactly what was going on. Yeah, it was quite tricky, because the problem was we, like many military families, you move around a lot. Your kids go to school. Both my children were at boarding school at the time, and of course I was in Canterbury and they were both in Wiltshire. And I didn't want them to, I found out late in the afternoon. I didn't want them to know that night, because I didn't want them to go to bed on that without me being there. That would be the worst thing. So I remember phoning of my youngest school, spoke to her about it. She was amazing. And she said, who knows? I just need to make sure that there's no way she will find out from anybody. She knew who my friends were. She said, is there any way the news will get back? And I said, no. I'll come across tomorrow and I'll pick them both up. And she suggested, okay, my suggestion would be, because I was like, how do I tell her? What do I say? And she said, well, just come along and I don't know. She said, does she need any school shoes or anything? Like, no, because we'll just take her out of the lessons. And so what they did is they said to her, your mum wanted to come and see you, and she's going to take you out for an ice cream. And I remember walking down, and we went to Salisbury Cathedral, and I remember thinking, okay, she said drop it into the conversation, but how do you drop that into a conversation? It was really odd. Anyway, I sort of managed, but thankfully it was sunny that day, so I could put sunglasses on, because I did not want her to see because I knew it was going to be really difficult. And I remember sort of saying, and she just looked at me and was like, what? And I said, it's okay. And she just kept looking at me, because she wanted to see what my reaction was, to see what her reaction should be. So I was literally digging my nails in, thinking, like, come on, try and be really grown up about this. So, and but you can't, can you? You know, it's real life, you can't. But she, I think I possibly played it down a little bit too much. I think I just said, look, he's coming back, he's fine, I've spoken to him. You know, we're going to see him now. That's it. He won't be going back out there, which is great news. And I said, we're still going away, because the friend I was meeting, her husband phoned up and said, I think you should still meet her tonight because he comes back tomorrow. You don't want to be on your own. Go with the kids, go and be with her. And actually that was the right thing. So I was trying to be jolly. Looking back, I think I should have been possibly a little bit more honest. My eldest daughter was due to go to France the next day, and it was a bit of a trip. It was one of those school cultural trips to Disneyland Paris. And I said to the house mistress, I really feel she should go. It's only overnight, and then she can see him afterwards. And so we sort of went along with that. Again, I don't know if that was the right decision, but you just do what you think's right, don't you, at the time? And then we all went away, and then the next day, I remember leaving early. I went via David's parents live in Worcester, which is on the way to Birmingham, which was quite handy. So I picked them up, and then I was with Clara, my youngest, and the parents, and we all arrived at Sellyoak in Birmingham, waiting, just that awful bit of waiting for the plane to arrive and then the ambulance to arrive, which is really surreal. It just feels like you're there forever. Didn't enjoy that, actually, because you're sitting and there was lots of small talk, and the welfare service are amazing. Of course, they're just doing their job, but they're just chatting away about all sorts. And inside, I just wanted to scream, I don't want to talk. Stop talking about this. He's going to, I don't know, it felt really odd.
I'm sure it would be surreal, because I don't think, there's no handbook for this.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't know how you're going to feel. You don't know how the kids are going to feel. You don't know
you don't.
What's going to happen. You don't know what David's going to be like when he comes to the hospital. Nobody knows. So
no.
I think we can have a baseline of, say, right, this is sort of the procedure.
Yeah.
However, that's loosely put together. Things change, as we know.
Yeah.
But as you said, Ali, it's a massive shock to the system, because you know that some things have got to change.
Absolutely, yeah. And you don't know what you're going to see. I mean, I was sort of, just desperate to see him. That just desperate. And when, of course, the worst thing is when the ambulance has arrived, you've been notified he's there in the hospital, and then it took what seemed like forever before we could go up, because what I hadn't realised, he'd been quite ill on the flight, so it took him a long time to get him out and back up onto the ward. And of course, you don't know that. You just think, I want to be there now. And I kept saying, can we go yet? And obviously they knew what was going on, but they weren't going to say. I remember in the end, they must have thought I was so bossy. I stood up and I said, I'm going now. And they were like, and I said, I don't care what you say, I'm going now. Because it just felt like such a long time, but it was fine. They then just took us via the cafe to sort of kill a bit more time. And then obviously we went up from there, which was just, weird. He was still in his desert kit, and he was, he hadn't been shaved or anything. He just looked dirty and grimy and grubby. And in fact, the nurse said afterwards that she was really angry when she saw that that's how he'd come back. So they wanted to clean him up a bit naturally before we went up. And I can see why they wanted to do that, because it literally looked like he'd just stepped out the desert. It was weird.
Yeah. It just shows you how quick they actually get you from being out there right at the front doing the job that David was employed, and then unfortunately got injured. And it just shows you how you get from there, you get to an aid point, you get dressed up, you go to another one, then then he's put on loads of ketamine. Yeah. Forgets about everything. He lands in Birmingham, and then it's just quick, so you can understand why he was in that.
Yeah, absolutely. They did the right thing, but it's
And fair play to the medical teams that are actually out there, and the training that the boys and girls get who, know how to put tourniquets on, know how to inject, they know how to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And the guys that are on the Mert helicopters are just phenomenal. And we've had the privilege to meet a couple of them through that, and they're just fantastic. The skill level would put any doctor or surgeon to shame. And they're on a helicopter battling around the air and still keeping these guys and girls alive. Amazing. Amazing.
I completely agree, Scotty. And I think that was the thing, is when I knew he was in Camp Bastion and I knew coming back on the flight, I knew he was in really good hands because I'd seen the training they'd received. They are amazing what they do, and just their knowledge. And I don't know how they do it because obviously they were very busy, weren't they, out there? They do an incredible job. Yeah. And in the hospital the whole way through. I mean, can honestly say everybody from start to finish was amazing. They all did their absolute utmost. I can't complain about any of it. I really couldn't. Yeah. They were amazing.
So then move to David has landed. What was your first conversation with him then? For once, first proper conversation of once, all the drugs and all that had worn off and it was,
Yeah.
I haven't finished making the chili. What happened to the chili? I'm waiting to find out.
We did actually take the chili and eat it that night. Yes. Well, of course, all of us went up. So it was David's mum and dad, myself and Clara, all sort of went up at the same time. And I remember then thinking, I just sort of turned to Clara and said, "Don't be frightened. I don't know, there might be wires or machines, there could be all sorts, just but whatever there is for the right reason, just don't be scared by it." And yeah, actually that's the worst, and that was definitely, I think, because it was David's worst moment when we all walked in. Clara's face just dropped because he got traction, I think, on the leg. It wasn't even the machines, it was just him. He was grey. He just didn't look well. Well, obviously he wasn't well, but he can't explain that look, and he can't explain the smell. One thing they'd warned us just beforehand that an opened wound is really smelly. But my goodness me, it was unbelievable, the smell. Never smelled anything like it before. I think I saw David obviously clocked Clara and she just literally went into shock. And I think that was hard for me because it was hard for David, but that was really hard seeing her like that because what do you do? But the surgeon was absolutely brilliant and he took her off and he got down to her level and he was 100% honest with her about what had happened, what was going to happen. And I thought that was brilliant. It's definitely the way to be, is 100% honest. And then we were just working out logistics of because I'd said, because my in-laws live just over half an hour away from the hospital, 40 minutes maybe. I said that I'd go back with them all and stay there. But actually, there was no way I was leaving. You just can't. So Clara went back with them after we'd all stayed for a long time. We'd had a long chat. I think it was also hard because David's mother was quite frightened when she saw him and admitted to me afterwards that she didn't think he was going to make it because she hadn't just sort of the look. I never, ever thought that, though. I knew all along that he was going to be okay. I just knew he would. Gut feeling. But I ended up, they found me a place. Some of the accommodation that was there was for families, and there was a room, and they found me a room there, and I stayed the night, and then actually ended up staying there for 5.5 weeks, I think, in the end, something like that.
Well,
but
good.
But they were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So I remember the families officer saying to me, "Look, do you want a hotel or anything to stay in?" I'm like, no, why would I want to stay in a hotel? I want to be here with other families in the right place where literally you just walk across the road and you can come and go. They're brilliant. You can literally, there's no visiting hours at all to start with. You can stay for as long as you want, which is really good, really good.
Well, I think that's needed because you've been away for a long time.
Yeah.
And who do you want closest to is your nearest and dearest. So have that ability for you just to walk across the road or go to the shop and get them a bag of sweets and then come and just, just chat. It's just that's the way it should be.
And also to monitor a bit, it was like, well, you mentioned earlier, Alex, about there being things in the paper and making something of it. That continued afterwards. It was almost, I felt, it was like he was a novelty. Oh, look, a CO's been shot. He's been injured. Let's go and visit him, even though they're not friends. But let's just go and just say we've done that. And they have liaison officers that work there. And there was a Marine liaison officer who was really good because he was also quite strict with me as well, where he'd say, what have you eaten for lunch? Because sometimes you just forget. And he would say, come on, you need to go and eat. Or if a visitor came in and spent too long, we had this sort of system where I gave him the look because I found it hard. I just think, oh, they've come all this way. Whereas he knew it wasn't helping his recovery. And he would go and tell them that they had to hoof it, which was good. Because otherwise you sort of sit there and I'd watch him. And I think David always felt that he had to sort of sit up and chat to them. And as soon as they'd walk out, you'd see him like, gone. It was just too much. When it was genuine, families and friends, of course, it was wonderful to see them. And that's absolutely what. But when it was just somebody coming along because of who he was, or that's what it felt like to me. I really didn't like that at all, and that's when I just,
okay, chaps, we've got one of our own. Let's go and see how young what's his name? David Richmond. We're going to see him. In fact, where's the hospital? Who's got the map?
All right.
Yeah. Hello, David. Wrong one, sir. Oh, hello, David.
It's the worst sort of military tourism.
Oh, it's just awful. And this one chap, I had no idea who he is. Oh, God, I hope he doesn't listen to this. But I remember him coming in, plonking down a bottle of whiskey onto the table. And you think, what use is that? What is he going to do with a bottle of whiskey? Actually, doesn't like whiskey anyway, but that's not the point, It just seemed all a bit odd.
But people are really strange, aren't they? I mean, I ended up in hospital, silly accident with a knife at a mess party, and it's really weird. But I was sent off by the chaps. He packed an overnight bag for me, which had a bottle of whiskey, 200 cigarettes, my record collection, and I think every book I'd ever read. And it was sort of no towel, no toothbrushing.
No,
but that's that's the military for you.
Yeah.
I am going to have to come back to that at some point, Rupert.
Not today.
Not today, but an accident with a knife in a mess is something that you brush past quite quickly.
Put that down, Alex.
Well, I've added that I'll add that to my questions and to ask later. But Ali, so moving forward then to Headley Court. So he was in hospital for 5 weeks, or was that how long you were just staying there?
It was about 5.5, 6 weeks, I think it was, in hospital, where I stayed in that little room to start with, and then when it became school holidays, I moved over into a flat because the girls could then come along as well. My other daughter, my eldest daughter, came along beforehand, and in fact somebody went and picked her up, and she came along to the hospital, and she was only supposed to be there for the day, and it was really clear that wasn't the right thing to do. So I decided that she could stay, but my accommodation was only it was just for me. I think you had to be over 18 to stay there, but I'm afraid I ignored that, and I snuck her in because I had a double bed there anyway. I snuck her in and she stayed the night. And actually the nurse in the morning was brilliant. She just looked at me and went, I haven't seen anything, because she knew she wasn't allowed to be there. But I just knew it was the right thing to do. And sometimes you just have to go with that, don't you?
Oh, definitely.
but then they were great. We had the flat, and it meant that we could go and visit. But I was also keen to do a bit of sort of everything. I took them into Birmingham. We went to Cadbury's World just down the road, and I tried to sort of mix the day up a little bit, I guess, for them. But then he then went to Headley Court, and then it's very different, because you've gone from a hospital where you're allowed to be there 24/7 and you're told everything, and it's a case of you go to Headley Court and the door is shut, like they're mine now, thank you, which is definitely the right thing to do, because of course they now have to concentrate on the next stage, and the last thing they need really is the family hanging around. And it's their time, to be with all the other guys that have been through similar experiences. It's their time to get better together. But I think what's hard is, of course, a lot of people will see it as the 5.5 weeks in hospital. But what they don't see is the 4 years at Headley Court afterwards, where they're away for so many weeks on, so many weeks off for all that time. So whereas for many, it feels like the operational tour's over after 6 months, but for you as a family, it's quite a few years of going through continual hospital appointments, continual time at Headley Court. It's a long time. It is a long time. You just get on with it, because everybody else is in the same boat. But there are times when you think, no, this hasn't finished yet.
Wow. So where did the idea then for Band of Sisters and Band of Brothers kind of come from then? Was that something that was building up over the 4 years, or was this an idea that you maybe had beforehand? And
no, it already started. So basically, when I was sitting at David's bedside in hospital, sometimes there would be other visitors and people coming around on visits, and I first met Bryn and Emma Parry. They came. I didn't know who they were. I'd vaguely heard of the charity Help for Heroes because they'd started the year before, but to be honest, unless you have something to do with the charity, you don't really necessarily know what they do or what they're doing. And I just remember they had a real impact on me, because you could just tell they really cared. They had this genuine passion, and actually we were probably the only sort of charity at the time that really said, well, what about how are you and how are you all coping? Is there anything that we can do? And that had a real impact. And I know it did on David's mother as well. And in fact, I remember going back to the room that night and going onto the computer and going onto the website, and I ordered a load of the little mugs with teddy bears on, which we've still got now, because it just felt, I thought, right, I want to do this. And I just knew it was a charity I wanted to be involved in at the time, because of the impact that Bryn and Emma had had on me. But we were still living in Canterbury. And eventually, when we moved back to Wiltshire, I thought, right, I'm going to go in and I'm going to volunteer. I'd given my job up before because it was just impossible, quite frankly. David was to and from hospital, etc. So I just needed a bit of time. So I went and helped out at the Tin Hut, and it was great, answering the phone, helping with some of the letters and that kind of thing. And the Band of Brothers had already started, and that was purely because people were phoning the charity and offering days out or nice experiences and things like that, and there was no way of being able to get them to the guys. So they started the Band of Brothers initially. That's what they started it for, obviously morphed into more than that. And then Emma asked if I'd go along to a meeting because they wanted to talk about what they could do for the families. So I jumped at the chance, and they had other people who worked in the charity who had military connections. They had another mother, another wife, and they'd already got the name Band of Sisters, and they'd sort of got an idea. And then we literally sat round the table and talked about what could be done and what needed to be done and how we could help. And by that stage, actually, I think I'd experienced where there was massive gaping holes. Nobody's fault necessarily, it's just they hadn't really thought about it. And I had to fight quite a few battles, actually, particularly regarding going up to hospitals. And I'd always said, I'm big enough and ugly enough to fight my corner, and I will do it. And I was that bit older than a lot of the others, because, David was 41 when he was injured. A lot of people are 20 years old, and some of the wives were really young. And of course, mothers don't necessarily understand the army system either, so they didn't know what. So I just knew I needed to fight for them to have a voice and to be heard. And at the end of the meeting, Emma just turned to me and said, well, I think you're the right person to run this. Do you want to do it? I was like, yes. So that's how it all started, which was amazing.
And is that when, obviously, I've been lucky enough to meet you and Ollie Metcalf, now
Yep.
Brown, I believe.
Yeah.
Because you used to absolutely set up like a formidable team, and a firm and friendly, formidable. It was just been fantastic how you have just turned that and then started to involve everybody and keep people informed. And fair play, Ali. I think it's been absolutely great what you and Ollie managed to achieve. And then not just that, but travel to the different areas of the United Kingdom and get everybody involved and come round the table and meet for something to eat, meet for a coffee, have a chat, get everybody together. Fair play. Absolutely. I tip my hat to you, man.
I'm so glad that you mentioned Ollie Metcalf, as you said, now Ollie Brown, because she was amazing and so passionate. And we made I think, you're right. We made a great team, actually. She's a great friend, always will be. And we were both fighters. There was no way somebody was going to say no if we knew it was the right thing to do. So we probably we maybe upset a few people along the way, but it was for the right reasons. It was passion about getting it right. Those were fantastic years, actually, just the best, without a doubt. But I'd say the downside is it completely takes over your life, because that passion that you're driven by is, you think about it, you breathe it, you feel it, and you kind of have to, but there's only so long you can do that for before it starts to eat away. And actually it was amazing to do, and it's the best thing I've ever done, without a doubt. I have no regrets at all.
So as a charity, obviously Band of Sisters offered respite breaks and days out. Obviously, as a charity, we offer, our main purpose is we hand out respite breaks and time together. What did you think the impact of those breaks were?
Oh, massive. I mean, it's just, more than anything, it's knowing that somebody else has thought about you. That means a huge amount, just knowing that somebody cares and somebody's offering that. And to get away from your four walls and to go somewhere else as a family and be a family means a huge amount to have that time. But no, I think what you're doing is wonderful. And offering breaks to families, because it is so needed. And it is behind it, knowing that somebody's offered that to you, somebody's cared enough and wanted to do it, means more than going online and just booking something yourself somewhere. It means so much more.
It was to jump in on that too, I was very humbled by the fact that I was allowed to go on a Give Us Time holiday, Joanne and I, knowing that someone from the general public give up their timeshare or holiday home. So that Joanne and I can have that. Because when I first mentioned about being ill, and Joanne didn't know when we were obviously married, and I had that, and then having that ability to go away and reconnect with your loved one in a safe, secure, beautiful place that someone has kindly given you, you can actually sit down and strip back the layers and be yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then put a plan together of how you're going to move forward. And occasionally there is bleeps or where you fall backwards. But you've got that plan that you've managed to sit in a beautiful place, sit with the ones you love, and you can formulate that plan. So you're quite right. It's absolutely. But for me, I find it. I was very, very humbled by it, and still to this day, if someone says, "Oh, by the way, it's someone's actually sat down and said, I can help these guys and girls who maybe need that little bit extra time, and I'd love to shake everybody's hand who's absolutely donated or given to both amazing charities, because they're just fantastic.
Yeah, no, I think it is great. It's a wonderful thing that you're doing. And also with, the family isn't what some people just assume a family's a mother, a father and 2 kids or whatever. It's not. And with Band of Sisters, I certainly saw family is all sorts. And sometimes it's really tricky. Sometimes families don't like each other, particularly if somebody is married. The wife doesn't necessarily get on with the mother-in-law. Now, that happens quite a lot. And then that's really quite tricky because there's the resentment, particularly with hospital. Well, the mother who's brought up the young lad for 20 odd years before he's got married is now feeling left out of it because they're not invited along because they don't come under the next of kin. But the next of kin is chosen by the patient, and it is hard. And I found that one of the trickiest things, particularly if a family didn't get on or if there were issues there. And also the children. My kids were older, and I think they felt that nobody really took into account how the kiddies felt from all ages. And actually they were right. That's where there was something missing. Who explains to the child, or even who tells the parent what to tell the child? How honest should you be? And there was a guy who worked for the Army Welfare Service at Selly, and we get on quite well, and we were having a chat about the children and what could be done. And he said, I think we should have a book or a magazine or something that's fun and interactive where we hand it to a family so at least somebody can read it to the child and be honest about it. And I remember thinking, absolutely, we have to do this. So I contacted Bryn and Emma. I was working there at the time and said, we have to do this. We have to, nobody's thinking about the children, and there's a slight, I said, it's only a simple solution. It's not going to solve everything, but it will help those initial days. And Bryn himself he was an army child and he'd lost his father. So I knew he had a big understanding as well. And they said, okay, if you both put something together, bring it to us, tell us what it is that you want to do. So Glenn had put this fantastic presentation together, and we went in there and we were all like, right, this is what we've got to do and this is why we want to do it. And I remember they just looked at us at the end. They went, yep, okay, off you go and do it then. Oh, okay.
Was that
right.
Ali? Was because just jumping in on that, was that at the stage because Bryn is an amazing artist?
Yes.
As we know, like you can see all the pictures of the teddies or the is when you started to put that program in place to inform the kids. Is that when Bryn started to draw the different characters?
No,
or was that done before?
Yeah, he'd already had done all the bears with the different uniforms. And this is the first time, and it was amazing. He handed it over to somebody to do on his behalf. There's no way he could have done the book. He was far, far too busy. But we found a company called Colour Heroes. That was just their name. They it just so happened to fit in. And actually, the guy who was the illustrator managed to copy Bryn's teddy bears and put them together. And we went through, I remember going through the text and basically we had it done, printed, ready and out in 6 weeks, which was unbelievable. And that was probably one of my proudest moments at work.
Oh, amazing.
It was so wonderful and scary to say, okay, go on, crack on. and then being allowed to do it, because we all know how liberating it is in work to be told you can do what you think is the right thing to do. And it was wonderful to see, because then it meant that anybody else turning up to hospital had a book that somebody could sit down, they could read it through, saying it's okay to be upset, it's okay to be frightened, this is what's going on. It had stickers and all sorts of interaction on there. I mean, it was written in a way that there was also some, it was also quite good for an adult. So it was aimed at all levels, because sometimes an adult needs to know what to do as well.
Yeah.
You don't know what you should be telling them. Well, this just allowed you to read it, so you could tell them the truth in an easy way.
Fantastic. Well, I have one final question,
okay.
and then I'm gonna open it up to the floor, obviously, for everyone then to ask. I just wanted to know, what was your favourite thing about being a military spouse?
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's a hard. Yeah. Oh, it's a hard question. It's a question that I see. I mean, I see a lot from, I think online and everything. Because we follow a lot of military spouses on our social media.
Yeah.
Sharing that being a military spouse is unique. You're not to an ordinary spouse. It's very, very different. I know I've just really sprung that on you at the last minute.
No, not at all. Do you know what? It's actually, there's lots of wonderful things, but it's a really easy question if you just say, what is the best? For me, pride. I can't tell you how proud I am of the military and everything they do. And when it comes to, like say, when they put a bit of pomp and ceremony on, which we all love, and for us it was the pipes and drums, or you'd go and watch, and you'd watch it, and the pride, because although what you're obviously seeing the pomp and ceremony, you know of everything else that's going on. And I was very proud of everybody. I mean, obviously there's lots of other things. It's lots of difficult bits. We've talked about, you're a single mum a lot of the time, you're on your own. But you make some incredible friends. You meet a lot of people, but you hold on to a handful that will always be your friends. And that was great. They do a good party as well, actually.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to open it up to the floor.
Oh,
excellent.
No. I dread to think what Scotty's going to ask me.
No, Ali, it's not that bad. But what we normally do, we just kind of put the guest on the spot here. I've got a quick fire. We call it rapid fire.
Yep.
So it's 1 minute of rapid fire questions. If I can have a minute on your stopwatch, please.
Oh, no. Okay.
It's just first things that come to mind, Ali, and try and keep it clean because it's a family show. Well, are you ready, Alex?
Go.
Here we go. Texting or talking?
Talking.
Favorite day of the week?
Friday.
Favorite city in the US?
New York.
New York. Did you have any nicknames your parents used to call you?
No.
There's a pause there. I might come back to that. Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
Ooh.
Speak every language in the world.
Speak every language. Favorite holiday?
Oh gosh, far too many. Loads. Do you know what? A simple holiday to Cornwall with us, my family, would beat even lots of. Yeah.
Good. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you at keeping secrets?
9.
9? Ah. First celebrity crush?
Oh, Colin Firth.
Colin Firth?
Yeah, until his part in Mamma Mia. And then that was a bit sad for me, but Colin Firth.
If you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
1940s.
1940s. Ooh. And that's the minute up. But I would.
Oh, amazing.
Thanks, Scotty.
No, you're very welcome. And also, before I hand questions over to Rupert, you're very good at You're not. You're a bit of a gin lover, I believe.
I do like gin, yes.
And you do make it, and I have sampled a couple.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Is
Just
that something
finished
you're
the
going to
batch.
keep? Your batch of which kind?
Damson.
Damson.
Yeah, it's quite nice actually.
Well, you should maybe bottle some up and send it to Rupert because But Ali, as a personal note, from as you've met my Joanne and I said about David as well, for what you've done in setting up things and bringing everybody together, nobody can really thank enough for what you've actually done.
Rupert, over to you.
Yeah, I had a quick one, although I think it's quite difficult because you dealt with a lot of change over a very short period of time, and part of that was the fact that you left the services, as it were, at the end. And I when I left was very selfish about it, and it was all about me. But of course, I realised pretty quickly that Kate and indeed the kids, suddenly had a change of life.
Definitely.
What was that like for you?
I think because we'd had quite a long lead up to finishing, because of David was doing well. He did start to work again. Then it came quite clear that it was going to have to finish. So he went through the sort of what's called a PRU, a recovery stage. So we sort of knew it was going to end. Didn't really know what he was going to do at the time. And actually, it's funny you should say that, because when we kept it quite quiet when he was going through talks regarding Help for Heroes and working there. We then eventually, when we knew it was happening, told the girls, and we said to them, look, your dad's leaving the army, and he is going to have to get another job, and it looks like it's all sort of sorted. And I remember Jenna, our eldest, going, oh, what's he going to do? And because they were hadn't realised how proud they were of their father being in the army. And he said, well, actually, I'm going to work at Help for Heroes. And she went, oh, she said, that's all right then. But that kind of feels like you're leaving, but you're not really leaving, so that's okay. So yeah, they were all right about it.
Oh, fantastic.
It's a big part of their life, really.
Yeah, exactly.
And for you, I gather from speaking to Josh a while ago, that some aspects of being with the military, if you like, have stayed with you, because the boys insist on going and doing dangerous stuff on bikes up mountains, and you end up picking up pieces. Was that a sort of flashback for you?
Oh gosh, the incident with Josh in Mallorca was just horrific. Yeah, it wasn't a flashback. It was just, it was a surreal time. It was so scary. I just remember waiting at the bottom of the mountain. We didn't know at the time that he had been in this serious crash, although the three of us, Jenny, myself and Anna, our three husbands, were at the top of the mountain still. We knew that something had happened. Again, you have a sixth sense. It's weird. It's happened again, that sixth sense. So we just knew that we were involved. We didn't know which one was involved, but we knew somebody or all of them were in an accident. And the worst bit was just waiting and waiting and waiting. And we all sort of were trying to deal with it in our own sort of way. We then had been told that there had been a bike crash, but we didn't, again, know. And we decided that we wouldn't phone the guys, because if something had happened, they would ring us when they were ready. But actually, after a while, you think, okay, I'm going to ring now. And I remember phoning. It was engaged first time. And then the second time, I looked at Jenny. I went, I said, somebody's picked up. But I don't know what had happened, because all we could hear was sort of like scraping on the ground. We heard Spanish voices. It was David's phone, but he hadn't answered it. So somebody must have clicked it. It's weird. And we just looked at each other and thought, okay, it's definitely them, because I've got Find My Friends and they hadn't moved. David's thing, he was in the same place the whole time. And Anna kept saying to me, check your Find My Friends, have they moved yet? And I have to be honest, I lied to her and said, I don't seem to have any 3G. I don't know. I'm not sure if they've moved. And then my phone rang, and it was David, and we all ran over. And I remember David, I went, "What's happened?" It's okay. Have you got Anna with you? I said, "I have." He said, "Could you walk away, please?" And then it was just awful, because of course Jenny and Anna still didn't know. They broke down. David told me what had happened and how serious it was. And then sort of gave me a list of instructions of what needed to be done. I said, okay. And Anna said all she could hear was me going, okay. And then I remember turning round, and she screamed, "Is he dead?" I said, nobody's dead. I just remember looking at her. It was the hardest thing, and saying, "Anna, I'm so sorry." And I just told her that he'd obviously been in an accident, etc. But it was, that's another one of those moments. Oh, what a menace! Why? I know.
But do you find that typical of, I suppose, the military spouse tends to go, "This is what's happened," over to you, and you end up picking up.
Yeah, you do pick it up. Yeah, absolutely right. Okay, we need transport. We need this. Right, who's going to go to hospital? Who's doing? Yeah, and then we just got in. But unlike you, Rupert, you were saying after your mess incident with the knife or something.
Yeah, Stevie was a jock as well.
Yeah. Jenny and I were a little bit more practical, because we did know that Anna was unlikely to leave the hospital. We knew that she wouldn't want to come home. And I remember going through her suitcase and thinking, okay, she's going to need a phone charger, a wash kit, underwear, and actually being quite, trying to think about what would I want if I was there. And that was quite helpful. But that was a weird moment.
Yeah.
It will never stop.
It will never stop. I do think it will.
No, there'll be something else.
Well, thank you so much, Alison, for being part of this. We like to ask a question to all our guests now, a final question, and that is, what does family mean to you?
Everything. It's number one. I guess everyone's probably going to say that, so you're going to get the same answer from me. Yeah, you soon learn what's the most important thing in the world. Yeah. You know, I guess you know it anyway, but it highlights it.
Oh, brilliant. Well, Ali, thank you so much for taking part. You've been absolutely brilliant. You've shared some incredible stories, and also given another side to David's podcast as well. You know, hearing about the side which obviously he wasn't seeing at the time. Which was really fascinating, because I do think we really skipped past the recovery section with David. I do think we kind of went from incident to to Invictus very, very quickly.
Yeah.
When actually there was a 4 or 5 year period. I didn't personally realise he was. It took 4 years from listening to him tell his story. I thought it was a lot quicker than that, and that must have been really hard to go through for four whole years. And it's just amazing that after all that, you then went and gave something back. You decided to go and do something with it, which is what I love about all our guests that we've had on, is that they've all been through something, but it's not let them stop them. They've evolved from it, and they've gone on to do fantastic things. So thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. Well, thank you everyone for listening to episode 6 of the Give Us Time podcasts. So make sure to like and subscribe to the Give Us Time social media pages, and thank you very much for listening.